Good morning, everybody. I'm Kristina. I'm here at the Missouri Botanical Garden. I'm here this morning with Cassidy and Taylor. We're here in the Goodman Iris Garden, and we're going to talk a little bit about irises this morning with Taylor, who is the horticulturist who takes care of them. And she'll just show us around a little bit, give you some tidbits of knowledge that you might not get if you were just here looking at them. And yeah, we'll go ahead and get started.
Hi. So I'm the iris horticulturist here. I take care of the irises, the daylilies, and the moles. So right now we're kind of about in peak iris bloom. A lot of the tall beardeds are started up, as you can see. So all of the dwarfs, kind of some of the smaller ones are pretty much finished and on their way out. But we tend to peak around Mother's Day here in St. Louis with the irises, so that's right on schedule. We can kind of just take a walk through. We can talk about some things here.
Yeah, sounds great. It's great.
I guess this one's kind of a cool one to start with. So if you want to look at the beards here, so the ones that kind of come up off of the falls where they have the beards coming up, that's kind of a novelty iris. So those come up in different ways. There's different special things that people breed for with that, but that's kind of a cool feature that is lost sometimes. So you can see that it has this little bit of separation here coming up, and so that's just a nice, neat little feature. This one is called Sway Away. So a lot of these are just looking at. This is kind of another novelty one where it's cooped up there. Talk about, I guess, the different
Sure,
ones.
yeah.
So the tall bearded irises are kind of the ones that people think of the most. So that's most of what, it's the most visible right now. It's the most of what we have. But there's 6 different classifications of irises, and that's based on height and the size of the bloom. So there's the tall bearded, the miniature tall bearded, the dwarfs, all of those different kinds. And so here in the Goodman Garden, we do have a couple different species. So like this one, when you come visit in the future, these give you a little overview of the different types. So it starts with tall beardeds here, the miniature tall beardeds, and it kind of goes back through. We also have Siberians and a little bit of Japanese irises in this one specifically. We also have some species. There's 30 or 40 species in here right now. So some of those, a lot of them are wild collected. Some of those are endangered, rare, more rare species. We also have some in the rock gardens and things like that where we have better drainage, because in here the soil, it's kind of hard to get the drainage that we need for some of the more delicate arid irises. Smaller ones, there's some tiny delicate miniature tall bearded, but they have these really cool features and little baby beards, so these kind of get forgotten about sometimes because they're less showy, but they make a really nice thing for your border, really nice cut flowers. These also really just look good planted in little swaths together along the edges of beds and things like that. So these are also a really valuable thing to utilize.
If you could just speak up a little, a couple people said it's kind of hard to hear.
Here's some of the standard dwarf bearded irises. So on these little plates here, they tell you about how, so these are 8 to 16 inches tall. So it kind of goes up from there in the classifications. So these are kind of midway done on their way out, but a lot of them are still very beautiful. Something that I do basically every day here is deadheading. I get a lot of questions about that when we're open and people are in and out. So it's pretty important for me to deadhead in here specifically because we have so many and they're so packed close together. Once it's all of the buds are done, things are kind of smushy and bad and like kind of fallen off, it just creates a lot of extra debris along with, you know, old leaves and things like that on the ground. So it's pretty conducive to any bacterial or fungal problems that we have. So I kind of just come through, like this one's done. So I just come through and pinch this whole thing off, or you can like snap the buds off if it works for you. I do clean up any bad foliage as I go along as well. It's not so common at this point in the growth period, but sometimes, especially with the rain and stuff, the leaves kind of get a little soggy, or if you have any kind of striping, bacterial problems, I just go ahead and cut those off. Later in the year, we do come through and do a major cleanup. I usually have a team of 5 or 6 volunteers in here with me once a week, and we spend typically the day in here cleaning up. We have 1,200 irises in here, and then additionals in other areas of mine and throughout the garden. So it's a lot of work, and we have a lot of volunteers usually to take care of it.
What's that been like, not having all the volunteers with you? I mean, in addition to deadheading, I'm sure there's lots of other work that needs to be done in here.
Yeah, so in addition to, you know, the deadheading and the general cleaning up of things, all of this is kind of open space. I can't mulch in here, so I do what I can with weed control, but a lot of it is hand weeding. So right now it's kind of under control because we've had the cool nights and everything, but it gets a little tricky during the summer because this is perfect. So lots of weeding, lots of deadheading and cleaning up of things. Not so much yet, but the tall bearded irises, the blooms are so heavy that if it rains or anything like that, we would typically come through and stake those blooms up, because as it rains, things fall over. So far, no, haven't had many problems with that. Should I talk about the sale at all, or like what we do for dividing?
Is the sale going to happen this year? Do we know?
Yet. But I guess that is an important thing. Division of your irises is an important maintenance thing to remember with them. It's not so necessary as with other fast-growing perennials, but with the irises, depending on which cultivar, some of them are more vigorous than others, but every 2-3 years or so you should be dividing your irises. So after they bloom midsummer, usually around July, we'll dig up and, you know, select the ones that we need to divide, and then we do that. We take like a third of the clump. It just depends on what the clump of irises looks like, but yeah, it's all rhizomatous, so you just pop it up and then chop off the rhizomes, and each individual fan will then become its own plant.
And does that just keep them from becoming too crowded?
Yeah,
or?
so if they get too crowded, they are competing for resources and water and space and all of the things. And it also, if they get too crowded, it lends itself to more bacterial and fungal problems because there's not the airflow and sanitation through there. So when we replant them, there's a way you replant it in kind of a triangle and kind of space them back out, and so they'll have that space to start growing again. Otherwise, like when people see a decrease in blooms, or if their irises just aren't blooming at all anymore, it's typically because they haven't been divided in a while, and it's time to do that. You can also like do a really low nitrogen fertilizer before the bloom to kind of help things along, depending on your soil there. So usually, if it's not blooming, it's one of those two things.
Awesome. And we just have some requests to see some of the flowers up close. So are there any in particular that are favorites of yours that are in bloom right now, or have like an interesting story behind them?
Well, some of the ones closer to us, like these ones are really beautiful when you get in on this part. They're just really pretty, and you lose a lot of that really interesting markings in the cultivars.
And is that a bearded? Are there beards on those irises, or is that?
So this one is not a bearded iris. This is one of the species ones. So this is Iris caucasica.
Presumably because it's from the Caucasus?
Yes. Very classic looking iris with these purple falls and the white, lighter lilac colored standards coming up there. Yellowbeard. This one's one of my favorites. This one's called Bluebeard's Ghost. I just really like the simplicity. It's on its way out, so it doesn't look its best, but the simplicity of just that white color of the petals with the purple beards, I think it's really, really nice. There's a few of them in here that are like that. It just depends on the hybridizer and their preferences. If they go for this more simple, kind of really elegant and nice look, or if they have a busier pattern going on, they have the full spectrum of things.
I always like this bed over here, the storybook bed. Not necessarily because the irises themselves are any prettier. I just like the hybrid names, the cultivar names on them. So let's see. Which one of these we're looking at? So there's like a Harry Potter.
This one
Is Grindelwald. Yeah.
So there's Grindelwald in here, there's Dumbledore, there's one called Golden Snitch. So each of these is themed after some kind of children's story. This is a really special little bed and helps a lot with youth outreach for the Iris Club.
And that, I think that one that's purple and gold back there is Jurassic Park.
Nate is asking, is there a variety that comes to mind that has an especially good smell?
Yeah, we talked about lemon.
We were just talking about the smell of this flower before we went live this morning. So it's a good question.
So this one's called Not a Lemon, so it has a very citrusy smell. Lots of puns on that name there, but in particular the smell, I can smell it in the wind right now. All of these have kind of, it's a variation of citrus smells, a really perfumey floral scents. There is kind of also just a general iris petal smell, but this one has just a very nice citrusy smell. And also, in this bed back here, it's the Historic Iris Preservation Society. It's a designated display garden. So most of the ones in here are intended to be a representation of historic irises. There's one from the 1500s, so a lot of these have pretty significant implications in like the breeding of irises, the history of irises, and HIPS, the Historical Iris Preservation Society, is pretty active and something that you can look up and see, and they have a lot of information on iris history. So this is also a neat bed to visit when you're here.
And those look different. Is there, like they're less ruffly?
Yeah, so I mean, just from an educated guess, I would assume that, so a lot of those are very early on in iris hybridizing. So these kind of, all these ruffles, the different markings, the stripe, the placatas, those kind of come along later as, you know, people get so much more into it. So this is kind of just like a picture of the evolution of iris breeding. So it's really neat to kind of step back on this end of the garden here and look at, you know, how it changes over time.
Why don't we take a look at some of those up close? So just to repeat, we are going to see some of these more historic irises back in this bed that show how they used to look and how things have sort of changed over time. So Cassidy was pointing out that these have a less ruffled falls. And you can see that when you get up close. So I just wanted to take a second to show sort of the breadth of the garden too. You can see there are quite a few in bloom. Not quite at its peak yet, but I think that's coming soon. Yes, and I will be here on Mother's Day doing a live stream of this garden for Mother's Day from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. You can tune in, and we're hoping it will be at peak by then. Assuming that there's no rain, this is where I will be. If it is raining though, I'll find a spot to take shelter and live stream from somewhere else, but we're hoping to show you guys the irises on Sunday. Like Taylor was saying earlier, they do tend to peak around Mother's Day. Any other favorites that we want to show off?
We haven't talked at all about this bed over here.
Yeah, we could head over to the east side and
Kristina, you said your favorite is Cajun cooking.
I like the Cajun cooking iris, yes.
I haven't seen that one in bloom.
I don't think so. I think it's this more like burgundy one. It is? Yeah, this one is one of my personal favorites. I just like the color. It's really unique, and I like the name. As we just mentioned, it's called Cajun Cooking. A lot of these, even the ones that aren't necessarily named after the storybook characters, have fun names like that.
Kind of makes me want some jambalaya just looking at it.
And now we are going to step over to the east side. Could you tell us a little about the irises that are over here?
So on the east side down here, most of these are reblooming irises. So they will bloom now with everybody else, but then later on towards the fall they'll bloom again. These have a little bit, they need a little bit more water than the standard ones do as they go into the rebloom. But yeah, a lot of these are really neat ones. There's one called Blueberry Tart over here that's no longer in bloom, but I would say that that's probably my favorite. That one just finished up. But yeah, this little bed is our reblooming collection. And some of them in the main garden do also rebloom, but they are focused over here.
And someone was asking who normally gets to name the irises.
Yeah, so all of the hybridizers, each one, as they register their irises, they technically name them. Sometimes with the societies, they'll do like a fundraising thing where they sell the rights to name a certain iris that they're about to introduce to raise money. Yeah, it just depends on the hybridizer. A lot of them name after their families, after their pets, or things that they're interested in. They have little niche interests all over the place that they have these wonky names at, and it's really a fun time just to walk through when all the signs are up and look at the names.
Agreed.
Now over here with this grass-like foliage, a lot of these are Siberian irises, and so most of them come from Jan and Marty Sachs. So these are just a different kind of irises that they just have a really interesting look, and that grass-like foliage is a pretty attractive feature of them. The ornamental foliage is very nice while you're waiting for the bloom. As we move over here, there's some more species irises. So a lot of these have quite a different look, and there's a couple signs around talking about the different species. This one's Iris typifolia. Shirka. I think this is the first year that it's bloomed because it was planted pretty recently, but it has this kind of really nice vortex on the falls there. It's really beautiful. So the ones over here can take a little bit more shade than the ones that I've got planted out in the main garden.
Someone just said, I have Siberian irises and they don't bloom anymore. Is there anything that they could do about that?
They could, I mean, I always recommend trying to divide if they look pretty dense. Like a lot of the ones that we just saw over there, those don't get divided as often as the ones in the main garden do, but they still do need division. Their root systems are a lot more dense than all the tall beardeds. They still have that weird wiry rhizomatous root system, but it's really thick, and when you divide them up, the roots need to remain moist because those have, you know, a much higher moisture requirement than the regular tall beardeds. But I would try dividing them at the end of the summer and see what happens there.
Well, shall we walk through and just pause on a few especially pretty ones? And then,
more other places where there's some irises.
yeah. So we're gonna just take you through here and pause on a few different irises, and then we're going to walk through the rest of the garden to show a couple other spots where they also bloom besides here in this main iris garden. And this is kind of neat. You can see one that hasn't fully opened yet, but is just about to bloom. And even at that stage, they're so beautiful. All right, and with that, I think Cassidy and I will take you onward to see some of those other irises. Thank you, Taylor, for the tour.
I was going to say really quick, if any of you are interested in knowing more about irises or getting more involved with irises when things come back, you know, to society, the American Iris Society, it's AIS.org. They have a ton of information, and it's, you know, cultivars, culture, dividing, all of that stuff. There's an annual membership. We also have the Greater St. Louis Iris Society, and there's also one in Kirkwood as well. So you can get involved with those, and those are the people that help take care of this. They help donate. They donate and buy in all the new cultivars. So the Greater St. Louis Iris Society is a pretty active club, and normally we have one meeting a month. And if you're interested at all in getting involved with irises and knowing more about them, the plant societies are a really good place to start. So yeah, they are great. And thanks for coming over to the Iris Garden.
Yeah, thanks for showing us around. All right, let's roll out. Yeah, thank you.
This is one of the other areas that Taylor takes care of, the Jenkins Daylily Garden, which is all, you can see all the foliage has come up at this point. Has come up at this point, and we have one that's in flower. I believe this is a species, Hemerocallis Middendorfii. So most daylilies will bloom in the summer, late May into June. Each flower only lasts a day, and then it's replaced by other flowers on the same stalk. So just that one little one that's in bloom, but you can see all of this sort of green weeping foliage is all the daylilies that are, give or take, a month or so out from this particular garden being a sort of showstopper collection for us.
And I did want to mention as we are walking that many of you probably already know this, but tomorrow is Give STL Day, and the garden is participating, and we would so appreciate it if you would consider donating the price of a ticket, since we are closed to admission right now, or of course if you're able, more is always welcome. But I did just want to mention that so that you know we are a part of Give STL Day. It's a great day to support cultural institutions like us or more of your favorite nonprofits.
I wanted to stop here. I can't remember how many weeks ago it was, but we had someone on one of our tours ask if the fringe trees were in bloom. And if that viewer is still with us today, here they are in bloom. Here's the fringe tree.
Yes, I think she asked on about the first week, and we were quite a ways out at that point. But
Well,
here we are.
Watching.
We have been watching.
Keeping an eye on the fringe trees, and here's one right outside the museum and mausoleum area that's in bloom right now. So wanted to make sure we stopped, and hopefully that viewer is still with us and is happy that we were able to show that off. Kristina, I was here on Monday, and this Scotch elm here was dropping all of these little samaros, these little paper thin casings for the seed, and this whole area was just, the air was filled with all these little papery seeds, and a lot of the ones that have fallen now have gotten wet from the rain, but you can see all of these. They're not, maybe not quite as pretty as cherry blossoms wafting in the wind, but you can see how easily this would pick up an air current and kind of fly through. So a great seed dispersal method for elms. And then maples also have the samaros, those little helicopters that everybody sees. I know my daughter is having a ton of fun with those as they fall in our yard right now. So I just thought I would point that out on our tour, as this neat little this giant Scotch elm and its cool seed dispersal method.
And you can see in flower right now, we're coming up on the giant dogwood.
There's a few irises over here on the sort of the border between the English woodland garden and the bulb meadow. Those are Dalmatian irises, and they're just kind of tucked away there. We could probably walk right along the edge here and get up close.
You can see these are a little less roughly and showy than the ones we were showing earlier, but they're still really lovely.
We still have a few azaleas and rhododendrons that are hanging on here in the English woodland garden. This is ginger. It's in flower here. These Pretty tri-petaled flowers. There's another fringe tree.
Oh yeah, here's another of those fringe trees that we had pointed out earlier.
And May is a kind of a transition time for a lot of plants. We just walked through the English woodland garden, and there's so much now that is just nice and lush and green that even a month ago didn't have any foliage on it, or maybe the flowers themselves were particularly showy. And as the flowers kind of cycle out and the foliage comes in, it's just super green walking through that space right now.
Oh, we've got some ducks right here in the top of a waterfall. Hi. You can see the female a little further away too.
Just sort of echoing that transition sentiment. We were here a month ago, and this whole place was filled with white blooms from the cherry blossoms. That was only a month ago, and now everything is
Green.
very green. As we're coming in this entrance to the Chinese garden, there's something I'd like to point out over here on our left that I just think is sort of neat. Is spruce, and you can see all that pollen and these little red, they look like strawberries almost, and I don't know why, as someone with allergies. But you can see all that yellow
Yeah.
pollen. And so there are lots of spruce and pine that are have these just really neat, colorful structures that are coming out right now. And that's where they're dispersing their pollen. You can see here on this the pollen.
Oh yeah.
So just real neat features to look for on some of the evergreens.
We haven't stopped in the Chinese garden on these tours in quite some time now, so it's good to be back. You can see here these peonies are starting to open. They're not there yet, but their buds are about to burst.
One of the reasons that we came here, oh look!
Oh my gosh! Everyone, we just nearly stepped on this little turtle. He's hiding away, but...
Clearly knew we were coming.
Yeah. Oh, there his little head's poking out. Let's see if we can show you guys. Hello! Alright, we'll leave him be. Always fun to run into turtles around grounds every now and then.
So one of the reasons that we wanted to come here on this tour, since we're sort of featuring irises, is there are a couple of species of irises that are blooming here. And this one, a lot of these types of irises are just sort of commonly known as yellow flag. And one of the types of yellow flag is actually the inspiration for the fleur-de-lis, which is the symbol of the city of St. Louis. So kind of neat to see the plant that inspired a symbol that so many of us are familiar with here in town.
That is cool. I'd heard that before, but I've never been able to visualize it with the like tall bearded irises. Those do look a little more like that fleur-de-lis. And here, do we know what kind these are? Some type of iris here.
Yeah, I looked it up the other day and now it escapes me. There are a few others. I mean, you can sort of see on the other side of the yellow flag, there's all this tall, spiky foliage and sort of the buds, and those haven't even opened yet. So there are some other varieties of iris in here, and we have a really great collection of Japanese water irises in the Japanese garden along the zigzag bridge. Those are later bloomers as well, so they're still coming along. Here's more of the pine. I mean, I would get in trouble from a botanist, I'm sure, for saying this out loud, but this is sort of like the flowers. just
Yeah, and you can see all that dust. Woo!
gonna be sneezing over. Yeah, this is a really pretty columbine here. Orchid, perhaps?
Oh yeah, look at that.
So
This is
that's
a ground orchid. Can really see that detail there.
Speaking of irises again, here's a few more. Oh yeah. We could see it a little bit better from the other side, but I think Kristina might be able to kind of sneak in here. It's right up, hanging over the water.
Oh
you
yeah.
can see little white blooms from wisteria.
You can see those white blooms down there. It's a wisteria.
You know, we mentioned this earlier for people who maybe are just now tuning in. We started in the iris garden, and the irises there are getting really close to peak. They typically peak around Mother's Day. Kristina is planning to be here on Mother's Day, 11 to 1, to provide a live stream of the iris garden. So if you need a nice virtual way to send your mom some flowers, you can send her a link to that live stream from Facebook. I think Kristina and I are going to wrap up our tour here with a nice shot of the mallard enjoying the pond here in the Chinese garden. Of course, he swims behind a rock.
Rock, right when you say that. There he is.